Chapter 16. Another Feast. The feasters marveled at Aiden's catfish, and they all congratulated him for his skill and bravery. The cooks, who were beginning to doubt they would have enough fish for a proper feast, were especially grateful to have such a large quantity added to their store. Unlike the treaty feast at Tambluff Castle, there was very little pomp and ceremony at the Feechee feast. The Feechees wore the same clothes they had worn earlier in the day. They sat where they pleased, or stood, if that's what pleased them, for there were no tables anyway. There was no trumpeting or standing up or sitting down when Chief Gergo showed up. And whereas only the great nobles of Cornwall had been invited to Darrow's treaty feast, the Feechee feast was for the whole band, right down to the little wee Feechees. There was no entertainers at the banquet. The Feechees entertained themselves with games and frolics of various sorts, tree climbing contests, fire jumping contests, a spitting contest. Mrs. Turtlebane won the whole thing. Vine swinging exhibitions, and the most ferocious wrestling matches Aiden had ever seen. Also, a few good-natured fistfights broke out, which was the custom at all Feechee celebrations. Just as the games and contests seemed to be winding down, Aiden heard whooping and yodeling out in the swamp. Then the Feechee feasters began a rhythmic chant. Alligator, grabble gator, welcome to the feast. Catch a gator, snatch a gator, scaly, scary beast. Wrestle gator, hassle gator, boss of all the swamp. Tug a gator, hug a gator, stomp and romp and chomp. Tussle gator, wrestle gator, welcome to the feast. Grip a gator, flip a gator, scaly, scary beast. The Feechees had whipped themselves into a frenzy with their chanting when an 11-foot alligator charged into the crowd, pursued by 5 or 6 Feechee boys waving pine knot torches. The alligator feared nothing beside fire, and now that he had the campfire in front of him and the torch fires behind him, he had nowhere left to run. He hissed and growled, lunged and snapped at the Feechees who encircled him. The gator grabble was the highlight of the evening's entertainment. It was a simple enough game. Odo Watersnake had looped forest vines into a grabbling vine, using a branch that was long enough to keep him out of the alligator's reach. Odo looped the grabbing vine over the alligator's head so that he wore it like a necklace. The object of the game was simply to remove the grabbling vine from the alligator's head using one's bare hands. Everyone seemed to have his or her own technique for getting at the grabbling vine. Most involved sneaking up behind the alligator, but an alligator's bulging eyes see behind as well as they see in front, and every time someone came at him from behind, the alligator whipped around and sent the contestant scrambling long before he got close enough to snatch the vine. Some contestants worked in pairs, one distracting the alligator, the other reaching in for the grabbling vine. But even in that case, the alligator had little trouble putting both Feechees to flight. Benno Frogger, always something of a show-off, had a technique that involved coming at the alligator from the side in a diving somersault. But this method was more glamorous than effective. He was no more successful than the rest. Most of the Feechee folk had taken a turn. All the he Feechees, most of the she Feechees, and even a few wee Feechees. It appeared that the alligator might go back into the swamp, still wearing the grabbling vine. But then it was Aiden's turn. Aiden leaped onto the alligator's back just as he had leaped onto Samson's back, in that safe place right behind the alligator's head, where neither snapping jaw nor thrashing tail could reach him. From that perch he took his time, untying the vine from around the alligator's neck, in spite of the alligator's thrashing gyrations. When Aiden handed the grabbling vine to Chief Gergo, the crowd whooped and cheered. More than once he heard himself described in the most glowing terms the Feechee knew. The young civilizer's got what it takes. By this time the food was ready. The fare was not as sumptuous as the food served at Darrow's treaty feast, but Aiden was famished after such a day as this, and he ate heartily and gratefully. Rather than plates, the Feechees used mats of tightly woven palmetto fronds. The meal began with a salad of wild purple lettuces and leaves from the sweet bay tree. There were plums and mayhaws and citron melons. The catfish caught by the fishing parties had been cooked in the fire and brought out on bamboo sticks. The highlight of the meal for the Feechies at least, was the serving of the lizard eggs. They had been buried for 6 months and dug up for the occasion. Now that they were good and rotten, the Feechies considered them a delicacy. Aiden considered them disgusting. As the feasters were finishing their dessert of roasted acorns, Gurgo rose to his feet. "Friends," he began, "we're here to jubilate a new friend." All eyes turned to Aiden. Gurgo continued his speech. "Aiden of the Tam been doing things today that we didn't think a civilizer could do. He heard the Feechie watch out bark, and he didn't run off. He caught the biggest catfish ever cooked and ate at a Feechie feast. And not the civilizer way either. All finicky with a pole and hook, but with his bare hands. He won the gator gravel. There ain't no question. This civilizer's got what it takes." The crowd cheered and hollered and stomped on the soft ground of the meeting hummock. When the Feechies settled down again, Gurgo continued. "But Aiden of the Tam is our guest tonight because he did something else we never thought we'd see a civilizer do. He saved a Feechie's life. He wasn't paying no attention to his own safety when he rescued our dobro turtlebane from a panther." More cheering erupted all around the meeting hummock. "And that's why I declare that Aiden of the Tam is a Feechie friend, with all the rights and privileges that are due to a Feechie friend. That is to say, his fights is our fights, and our fights is his'n." The crowd cheered again. "Hooray for the civilizer! 3 cheers for Aiden of the Tam!" "A Feechie friend has to have a Feechie name," continued the old chief. "Aiden killed a panther. His Feechie name will be Pantherbane. Aiden Pantherbane." Gurgo motioned for Dobro to come to the forefront. He removed the panther cape from Dobro's shoulders and placing it on Aiden's shoulders, he said, "It's time we gave this panther cape to the person it belongs to." The chieftain then nodded to Rabo and Junko, who brought stone pots containing a soupy mixture of gray swamp mud. They slathered the mud all over Aiden. It gave him the exact complexion of the Feechie folk. "This keeps the bugs off," explained Gurgo. Aiden wished he had had it earlier in the day, when the yellow flies were attacking. "It gives you a better color, too," Gurgo added. "And now," said Chief Gurgo, "there's one last thing." He motioned Aiden over to a stump that had been covered with a mat of palmetto fronds with like a tablecloth. "Kneel down here. Place your arms across this stump with your palm facing up. Relax as much as you can. It's gonna burn a little bit." Gurgo nodded at Odo Watersnake, who was standing beside the fire. Odo reached a pair of bone tongs into a pile of orange coals at the fire's edge. He pulled out a smoking chunk of carved limestone. Aiden watched nervously as Odo approached him, and he had to muster willpower he didn't even know he had to keep from pulling his arm away as Odo pressed the burning stone against the underside of his forearm. Aiden bit his lip to keep from screaming as it seared his skin. He couldn't keep the tears from streaming down his face. When Odo pulled the stone away, Gurgo quickly poured a slimy substance over Aiden's forearm and massaged it into the burn. To Aiden's astonishment, the pain in his arm melted away. He inspected his forearm. Though he couldn't feel the burn anymore, it had left a mark, an angry red scar about as long as Aiden's finger, in the precise shape of an alligator with open jaws and a curling tail. "Now ye bear the Feechie mark," announced Gurgo. "You'll bear it all your life. Any Feechie who sees this mark will know that you are a Feechie friend, and they'll be a friend to you." Gurgo extended a hand to Aiden and helped him to his feet. He straightened the panther cat cape on Aiden's shoulders and turned him to face the Feechie folk, and raised Aiden's arms to show the Feechie mark on his forearm. "Aiden Pantherbane!" he shouted. "Feechie friend!" The Feechie folk answered with one voice. "Aiden Pantherbane, Feechie friend! His fight is our fights, and our fights is his'n." The Feechie feast continued well into the night, though the guest of honor missed much of it. Exhausted from his travels and the day's trials, Aiden excused himself from the revels soon after the Feechie friend ceremony. Benno Frogger showed him to a vine hammock high in the crown of a live oak. Then Aiden slept just as soundly as if he were home in his own bed, blissfully unaware of the ruckus whooping, arguing, singing, laughing, caterwauling, and general merrymaking below.